Dr. Elman.
Well, it's 4:35, so I think we should probably move on with calling or resuming our board meeting for the discussion of the school board budget for 2019. Where's Charlie? Charlie, do I need a motion to?
No, call board order.
All right, then it is called to order. Dr. Parker, turn this over to you. Your show.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and we will try to give you a lean presentation, and if we look at the flow here, what we're trying to do is give you enough information so that when you see the estimate of needs that we'll provide you this evening, that you'll have a good understanding of all of the items that are listed there. We're going to go ahead and start with just a quick update on the governor's highlights from his budget and the budgetary impact of that. And we met with our consultant who did the compensation study for us yesterday, and they provided us with a very good detailed presentation. I'd like to share some of that information with you today. And we'll also look at our alignment of budget priorities with the strategic plan. Following that information, and after each portion, we'll ask our questions. That way we can keep it moving in a timely way and end on time. But we'll finish up with the estimate of needs that we're building the proposed budget with. As you're aware, at the February board meeting, we will present a proposed operational budget for FY19. And the following day, we're scheduled to visit you to present that budget once approved by the school board on February 13th. So tonight we're going to give you enough information to have a good idea of what will be in that proposed budget. Okay? I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Hellman, who's going to quickly speak about the governor's budget, and then I'll take over the salary study.
Thank you. School board chair, vice chair, board members, board of supervisors, chair, madam chair, and vice chair, and the other supervisors, and Mr. Culler, and staff. Thank you all very much. That's about half of my speech.
That was the worst part.
I want to briefly just highlight with you some of the details of the governor's budget, the governor's proposed budget. And what's interesting about this is I told the board last night, and Dr. Parker, I promise I will be quick. As I told the board last night, we're in somewhat of a unique situation, at least that I'm aware of, in that we had a governor named Terry McAuliffe who presented the initial budget on December 18th, I believe was the date that he presented it. But there was a governor-elect, Dr. Northam, and he is going to come and make amendments. We heard last week at a joint Virginia Association of School Superintendents and Virginia Association of School Business Officials that Governor Northam is going to make amendments. Then, after all that's done, we'll get those, so we'll get some more numbers there, and numbers will probably change. Then after that is crossover, and that's when the House sends their version of the bill to the Senate, and the Senate sends its version of the bill to the House, and they have conferees, and the conferees meet, and hopefully it won't be like it was back in the late 90s where they all just shook heads and walked out the door. Hopefully they'll come to a budget conclusion very quickly. So that's a little bit of a backdrop. What I wanted to is share with you a little bit of good news and some of the things that we have. In the governor's proposed budget, there is a reduction, and I'll show you a little bit of the impact on this, a reduction in the employer contribution rates for the fringe benefits, VRS and group life. Fund the state's share of a salary increase for funded SOQ instructional and support positions in FY20. That's December 1st at 3:05 p.m. that kicks in. That's the joke. That's the next fiscal year. So even though the governor's proposing a 2% increase in his budget, it will not take effect for the school board until the next fiscal year, December 1st of 2019.
Fiscal year?
December.
Yeah, yes,
Yes.
that is correct.
The states changed their,
December 1st
to the,
of the second year of the biennium.
yeah, but it's not, that's just when they're giving you the money. They're still the July to June 30th.
As I read it, and we can certainly get back to you, I mean, that'd be great news if that's the
I'm not saying you're
case.
getting it any earlier, I'm just saying their year is still July
Well,
1.
remember, they had it set up the same way the last time, FY17, and then they snatched the money.
Right.
So we never saw those dollars. They took 270, almost $190,000 out of our budget because those dollars were never
Give it.
They
realized.
saved the money though, because it's only part of the year they're having to deal
Right.
with it.
Right.
It's a delay now.
It's all about the state saving money, no question there. The other thing that's interesting, and they talk about standards of quality. Well, standards of quality are in the code. But there is, I would submit to you that there's no school division in the Commonwealth of Virginia that meets the standards of quality. The standards of quality are a floor or a minimum level of expectation that schools will perform and staff and operate. Minimal level. If a school division were to run at the SOQ as called for, there would be no AYP, there would be no results. I mean, you just don't have the people, you don't have the staff. The standards of quality are woefully inadequate. But they are going to fund the full share of it now.
Full share of a principal.
Yeah. So, give you an example, and it's on your presentation. They're going to fund the state's share of a full-time principal in all elementary schools in FY20. Now, current standard says an elementary school does not get a full-time principal unless it has an enrollment of 600. Now, I wouldn't want to be a principal of 300 without having some assistance. So to think that you're just going to have a full-time principal at 600, it just goes to reiterate my point. Then they talked about the VPI and the non-participation rate. They're going to, it's the way they pool the slots, and they're going to use the unused slots and do some things there. And then when we sorted through the whole spreadsheet, it appears as though we stand to gain approximately $270,000 in state revenue. I know, Mr. Culley, you and Dr. Parker were in conversation, so I hope that
Were you in that ballpark?
Is that the 270,000 they didn't give you last year?
They owe us.
So if you flip the page, I just want to give you an example of VRS. Now, for the school division, I can't speak to the county, but the school division, we're in the teacher group, and so they're classified as professional and non-professional. And if you look at this, you'll see I have a column for FY18 and then the FY18 VRS. Now, it's actually 25 point something, 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 and 24 point something, something, something. It's a reduction of hundredths of a percent on VRS. But when you apply it to a $21 million payroll, you can see that it adds up. So what we've done is we've taken the payroll for FY18 for both groups and applied the VRS rate. So we then have the professional payment, $5.4 million, the non-professional payment, $204,718. For current year, under the current year VRS rates, we would expect to pay about $5,681,000. With the reduction in the rate, we are looking at paying $5.527 million, or a savings of $153,795. And that's what we're anticipating from the change in the BRS rate.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. So we want to start off with some of the good news, it looks like. The governor has promised a very promising budget. Obviously, we'd like to see more done with salaries for employees, but it's a move in the right direction. And BRS, now that they're fully funded, their rates are starting to settle, and hopefully we'll see some progress there. The salary, the compensation study, which was done by Evergreen Solution, was a fairly comprehensive one. We focused primarily on compensation and not on reclassifying our positions. So their goal primarily was to look at the regional market to determine where our employees fall in terms of wages, minimum, median, and the top of our scale, to see where we stand. They also took a very good look at our salary scale, our current step salary scale, to see if those scales were viable or whether they need to be reworked. They started this work roughly around November. I'll quickly go through the methodology of the study and then some of the findings from that study. Now, where they are right now is they are currently still wrapping up their concluding variables. They're looking at our supplement. And they're also looking at some additional items that we asked them to go back and rework in terms of looking at our compensation for employees, our compensation formulas, and how we would rework our scales if we were able to do that. So they'll basically conclude with a written report, which we will share with the board once that process is completed. But we do have enough information this evening to share with you, and enough relevant information to work on our estimate of needs. So I'll start with that. Included in this packet is pretty much their PowerPoint. I'll skip the purpose page. I'm going to run through some of these slides, and please stop me if you have any questions. Their methodology was plain and simple. They collected a lot of information from the division. They looked at our step salary scales. They looked at our job classifications and made sure and reviewed our job descriptions. And then they did a market analysis by looking at the surrounding area, and we gave them pretty much very similar school divisions that areas and counties that you use for your compensation study. And they're listed in one of the slides moving forward. Once they did that, they did a market analysis of those school divisions in those areas, and also they used the counties. If you had any comparable positions, they also used county employees also in the study. So they looked at county employees for Caroline County as well, and we appreciate you providing that information. And then the last part was they are currently still looking at our benefits package that we offer our employees to see if that is still how that stands up in the market. They were to develop they met in focus groups, they interviewed employees to determine their opinions and wants and desires in terms of our compensation structure. And they also sent out a survey to the divisions that participated in the study. If you'll flip to the assessment of conditions. Now, I have a supplemental packet here, so I'm going to kind of work here with two things. One is the supplemental packet here, and as I review some of the findings, I'm going to point to the supplemental packet. And it says, looks like this right here. Okay. The first page in the supplemental packet is just our historical compensation, what we've done over the last 10 years with salaries in Caroline County. So I thought this would probably be interesting information for you because it kind of shows you what we've done basically each year in terms of employee salaries, whether we gave a step increase, whether we used percentages, whether we were frozen, whether we worked with certain specific employees. So it's just a 10-year summary that they used as they looked at the study. Okay. Now, the second page there is actually a page I'm going to reference in the notes here. So the division, the consultant said we basically currently have six salary schedules. They found that to be a bit unusual because that's a wide variety of schedules. And one of their main recommendations is that we condense our schedules to 3 schedules, which is administrators, teachers, and support, and then have enough grades on those scales to handle all of our employees. So right now, we have, as it stands right now, we actually have 6 salary schedules. In the past, it just made sense to split some, especially when there were some VRS issues. We created a VRS and a non-VRS scale and some other things, which expanded the number of salary schedules that we have. They felt that the range spread of our scales for teachers was adequate, but that the range spread for other employees on our scales was pretty much out of range. And I'll give you a good example. If you look at this sheet here, they said the range spread generally is recommended to be between 50 and 70%. If you look at the teachers on the top, our teachers are within the range. Our scale for teachers, they felt was adequate, because if you look at that where it says range spread, between the minimum salary when they first walk in the door to the maximum salary, they're saying should be between 50 and 70% difference. All right, so the teacher's salary scale they felt was within that. It was 69.6 when you look at the range spread. However, when we looked at the other 5 scales with other employee groups, we were as high as almost 110% between the minimum salary and the maximum. And I'll explain why there was such a wide difference. But as we look at developing a more consistent scale, they're saying we should compress that so that it's within the 50 to 70% range. So that's basically what they were saying, and I'll explain why we ended up in that 110% in a moment, because that explains another finding. The midpoint progression, generally recommended to be between 3% and 10%, is consistent upon all grades within the salary schedule with a progression of 5%. Basically, the midpoint progression. Deborah, help me out with the midpoint progression again? I'm drawing a blank. Midpoint progression was?
That's just, what they did was they took the beginning of scales and the end, and they averaged them, which became the midpoint.
Right.
And it's recommended to be 3 to 10%.
But 5 being optimal.
5 being, yes.
Okay, and they felt we did a good job with our scales because we were closer to 5%. Okay. Now, quartile analysis, they looked at, okay, well, if a person's been with us, if they're new, are they in the first quartile in terms of salaries? If they've been with us for 5 to 10 years, are they in the second quartile or third quartile? And then the folks who've been with us for an extended period of time, are they in the fourth quartile in terms of pay? And they found that our scales were pretty consistent, that employees that had tenure with us, the majority of them were in the right quartiles when they looked at the placement of each employee on our scales and how long what tenure they had with the school division. So they felt that was fine. They did feel that we had a significant compression issue. So they said compression analysis results could indicate that the division progresses some employees' salaries at a rate that is designed to get employees to a max of 30 years. But in their analysis, they saw that some actual employees were made more than the folks who supervise them. So because of our compression, we had some employees, we really have some significant compression issues there. The 12 entities that they looked at are listed on the page here, and Caroline County is listed at the top. But some of the same school divisions we used for the study were very similar to the divisions that you use indoors. And we feel these are some of the divisions that not only we compete for teachers with or staff with, but also they compete in the same regional market for employees that we do. We were glad that most of them all of these divisions participated, which was something. It was around the holidays, so they actually answered surveys and they gave us the information that we needed to complete the study. We looked at 60 benchmark classifications, which is 60 employee groups in Carolina in our school division. So we pretty much covered most all of our employee groups classifications amongst our employees in this study. And we found almost 401 matches, which was fairly good data for the study, because of most of these divisions participated. Now, as far as the findings, I'll quickly go through those. Evergreen found that overall the division salary ranges, when they looked at our salaries in the regional market, they looked at a minimum, a midpoint, and a maximum range.
You skipped ahead of time.
Yeah, I'm still on this page where we're getting to the results. And in terms of the results, what they found were out of the 60 classifications of employees that we had almost 20.5% of our employees were below the minimum market range. So that meant that their salaries did not meet the minimum for the market average. 5.8 were below the midpoint, and 1.1 were below the maximum. So basically what they're saying is we have a significant number of employees who are below what they consider the market minimum average salary. A high number of employees there. Then they found that as our employees stay with us, more employees are getting closer to the midpoint because our scale, again, starts off very low, and we know this. We've talked about this on several occasions. Our scale starts off very low, so we have a very low starting salary in Caroline. But if you stay with us, our scale catches up over time. So the midpoint, they found that the midpoint was around 5.8, and when you get to the top of the scale, it was 1.1. The key is employees have to stay with us in order to get to that point where they have a competitive salary in terms of the market analysis, in terms of the market rates. So they made some recommendations here, and then some further analysis of salaries. I just in the packet. After you look, I inserted some information here. These are inside your supplement. They're the Caroline County government employees classifications that participated, and here are the Caroline County public school employees that have similar classifications.
Dr. Parker, excuse me for one
Yeah.
second. When you're talking about start off low and then go high, you're talking about non-teachers, correct?
No, all employees. So there were 60 classifications of employees. And I'll share more information on that in a minute, it's in the package. So they did some analysis on, and I just asked them to share this because I thought this would be good information for the board. But these are just the comparisons of like employees between the county and the school division. If you look at the page next to that, Mr. Black's question was about which employees had a lower minimum starting salary. Here's every group of employees that participated in that were part of the study. And next to that is the survey minimum, which basically is the minimum market rate for their starting wage. And then if it's a positive number, and I'll look at the first one, the accounts payable clerk. The survey minimum salary, starting salary was $12.97. If it's 18.9, then that means that our current accounts payable clerk may be making more than the minimum, is making more than the minimum. Okay? So our average, so we're doing well there. And as we move to the midpoint, that 21.8% means that for that particular employee, we're paying quite above the market rate, the market average, based on the results of this study. And when you move to other employee groups and you see a negative there, next to it, go down one next to it, the administrative assistant, the market minimum is $17.11. So if you see a negative 12.2, that means currently our employee wages, our employees are making less than the market minimum beginning salary for that, based on the market rates in the study.
Is that, just so I'm clear, so that our administrative assistant that makes $17.11 is making 12.2% in the next,
Less.
that all other respondents
Right.
is the lowest paid person?
Yes, sir.
With comparable experience, or is it?
Yes.
Well, that was my question.
Yes, it's with comparable
Is it-
experience. They-
These are, but you got this figure, you called up and said, what's the average range, or you called up and said, what are they being paid?
They actually, the survey that they used, they actually asked them for specific employees and compared them in several different ways based on tenure and current rate. Because remember,
Experience.
other divisions, yeah, because other divisions, they freeze, I mean, they may have had frozen salaries also, so they were actually looking for actual employee salaries when they looked at these rates. Okay?
I got a question. If we go back to the page where you're comparing, how many custodians do you have? We don't have any.
Yeah, but
That specialist survey is, we have a contract with, Joey, who do we have our contract with that's changed? Service Master.
so when they contact them, they probably,
Yeah, so that person
yeah.
is around during the day, they manage the Service Master contract, order supplies, and if there is some sort of spill, they might get it up, but we don't really have what you would consider a custodian that you've got down here at $8. We got them too, but they're probably working for Service Master for minimum wage. So you gotta be careful with, if you wanna raise all yours to what our guy makes, because that's a
No, I-
supervisor position, not a custodian.
When I saw that, I probably thought I knew you sent out, but I didn't know if that was an actual rate or if it wasn't.
It's not really That's why it's got specialists on the end of it, because we could try to figure out what we were gonna call that person. They do have some custodial duties, but that's not their
So
main.
probably whoever responded said custodian or custodial, and that's what they took.
Right, but you might want to be careful with that if that skewed your numbers way up on your.
That's
I don't mean the
one
whole
of the
report, I'm
6
talking about just those people.
Yeah,
They're not, it's not an apples to apples with the county. It might be with other school divisions, which will keep it straight.
well, with other
but-
school divisions, it's a lot easier because teachers are teachers. Let's say, bus
And
driver,
custodian
bus
in other
driver.
schools are right, I'm just
Right.
saying that one's,
So, and the only reason we included the county was because, there may be like positions that we wanted to consider, and that, we thought that'd be good
the rest of
information
them
for
look
the
all right,
study.
but that one's.
Do you know if they also balanced out benefit packets?
They're looking at benefits now, that's the final part of the study. So if you look at that column with the minimums, with the minimum differentials, you see that some employee groups are above 20%, in terms of the minimum starting salary. So we included a sheet, there were 29 in total, employee groups that exceeded 20%, the minimum differential. So I listed those, there's listed those positions on this sheet right here.
Dr. Parker?
Yes, sir.
You have average, survey minimum, survey midpoint, and survey maximum. Where do your employees fall in the scheme of this?
It's
In the
comparable,
differential column.
yeah, it's comparable to the Carolina employee salary. Right.
So you're just using, you're using the survey midpoint for everything?
No, they're using the survey minimum, the survey midpoint, and the survey maximum compared to our employee group.
I see it.
And the percentage is the differential between our employee and the,
Yeah.
Principal's 33% low on starting, 8% low on mid.
And it's all about 3%.
It just reinforces
Well,
that
they
we
broke it
get
down
our
to hourly
salaries
wages.
to the pay scale
because we have some employees.
becomes closest to.
Mr. Block asked a very good question, I asked the same question myself. Is this based on a 40-hour work week, or is this based on an employee that works 12 months or 10 months? In order to compare apples to apples, they did hourly wages. Because some of our 12-month employees are 240, where another division may have 220, or another division may have 180. So in order to compare apples to apples, and teachers to teachers, or whatever, they did hourly rates, which is why you see the salaries listed as hourly wages, because that's the only way you compare so many different divisions and get an accurate
Without weighting
comparison. Right. So that's how the comparisons were made. 29 school divisions, 29 employee groups are over 20% below the minimum. When we get a little better on the scale when we get near the midpoint and to the maximum portion of the scale. Now, go back to that 110% separation between the minimum and the maximum on our scales. We've already said, this is confirming what we already know. We start employees off very low. And if they stay with us, or if they progress on the step scale, their salaries get better as they get to the midpoint and get better as they get towards the maximum. If we freeze their salaries on the step scale, they stay the lowest paid in the surrounding area. So that basically just confirms the data that we've been talking about in terms of our scales. But are there any questions about that? Because this is the primary findings that they shared with us yesterday in terms of salaries and compensation.
Other than, it's not complete yet, because we're still.
It's compensation, yes, and supplements will be included in the
Well, this
study.
is, all these rates are unburdened. This is the pure rates. Salary rate, or pay scale, it's completely unburdened. There's no overhead built into this, no vacation, holiday, taxes, any of that.
Wait, are there some of these positions that are VRS and some that are not?
Sure, yeah. Yes, sir.
Well, that's why it's unburdened, because you can't compare them if they're burdened. It's an unfair comparison.
Agreed. Do we have that data from the other ones, so we're comparing?
They're coming up as compensation, part of it, and later on, they're working on benefits, and trying to put the BVRS, health insurance, and all the other contributions.
Dr. Parker, can I ask a question, Ms. Murphy? I'm just trying to do some simple math here.
Yeah.
On the teacher elementary, teacher middle, and teacher high, I just took the 2667, and which you have on the minimum, and I multiplied by 40 hours a week, correct? As you're giving the teachers a 40-hour week, and then I multiply by, because we have 10-month contracts usually, like, right? So I mean, you subtract 8 weeks.
With a
and the
salary
calendar
employee,
year.
so their salaries are based on number of days, and the teacher works a 200-day contract.
200, 190.
It's 200 in Carolina. So it's, and it may be different from a different division. So it might be different in Spotsy, it might be different somewhere else. But since they're salaried employees, their contracts are based on number of days, not by a 40-hour week. But I'm sorry, but go ahead with your question. I just want to make sure.
No, I was just trying to do the math on it.
You're not gonna be able to back into it that way because none of them work 40 hours a week, they're not comparable in that
You have
way.
to do the division by something, is what he's saying. So what annual rate did you use for hours?
We didn't.
Did you, is it 200 times,
I would-
200 times 8? Or
I
is
would
it-
have to get the consultant to give me the actual annual rate that they broke down for Carolina. I know the differential is based, if you take the percentage and take the number that they have here, we can get to the hourly rate by just going ahead and comparing the percentage that's up for the minimum, the max, the median there. But as far as how they calculated the dollar amount for teachers, I'd have to get back with you on
Because
that.
we should be able to take this rate and multiply it out and come out with a base salary for a starting teacher.
What's your minimum teacher salary, 42,000? For a
42,
brand new teacher
42.
position?
39,
I'm doing the math here.
39,200.
39.
What do you get when you do the math?
I'm getting about 10,000 over.
So,
So based on my math,
But I mean, somebody's got to show what the hourly.
Yeah, I will show
Because if
you how
every
they
school
got that
division does, we used to do 190 days. If you're doing 200 and somebody else is doing 190, is the hourly rate really working out when they
But
do the division?
The way they explained it to us is that's why they did hourly rates, because that allowed them to compare apples to apples.
I understand that.
I'll be happy to go back and have them calculate, show how the calculation was broken down from an employee that's a salaried employee to an hourly rate. I'll have them do I'll share with you how they did the analysis to do that.
That doesn't seem fair, because if one rate is based on 200 and one rate is based on 190, I know it's a small difference, but the hourly rates are different.
Well, in order to compensate for it, I think there's a way they can add the regression there to calculate the hourly rate for that employee and the hourly rate for the other employee based on the number of days that they actually work.
The 200 is a state
Right.
law. The 190 that Mr. Seeley's referring to is the number of days that the teachers might have actually been there, because we gave them 10 days credit for working all the work they take home with them. It's what it's done. That's what that
Or
that is.
professional development
Right.
or whatever. It's a contract. It's a contract date. But, that's a very good,
That's what that is.
that's a very good question. We've written it down, and we'll get back to you. There,
Hours.
our consultant is saying we're comparing apples to apples. Okay, with that being said, now I'll get back at how they calculated the hourly rate. They have the analysis and the statisticians to do that work. And they've done over 100 of these, so I think they know how to compare apples to apples. But I'll get back and with an explanation on how they actually calculated our teachers compared to everyone else. In terms of the results, we asked them to go a step further because we knew we would need to do some work once we completed the salary study. In addition to condensing our scales to 3 scales, we wanted to determine what do we need to do to move our teachers to a reasonable salary in terms of market comparisons. So the consultant gave us 3 options, which we did not consider as our final options here, but this is what we have tonight from the consultant. So we wanted to share with you what the consultant's recommendations in terms of what we could do to move to a market, to move our employees' compensation more towards the employee, towards the average in the regional economy. So there's a slide here with 3 different options, and I'll just quickly go over these and the dollar figures that they recommended last night. Again, this is the beginning of some work that we would like to do with both boards and with your support. The first option they gave us was to bring our employees who are below their minimum for their employee group up to the minimum. And the dollar figure it would take from what they're saying is to bring all of our employees who are below minimum pay, okay, based on the study, up to the minimum pay rate, is that figure there in the first option. That's $682,000 and some change. Now, We didn't necessarily care for that option as much because that option only addresses employees that are below the minimum. It doesn't address employees that have worked with us for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, that are above the minimum, but are still working and who are still being paid below the market value, the market analysis. It just, that's right, it condenses, it'll bring a person that's first-year person closer to a third-year or fifth-year person. And it really was not the best feasible option that we said, but they gave us that figure because they said if you just want to take care of the minimum the number of employees that you have below the minimum, that's the figure that you would use. Now, the class parity date actually puts our employees, not only if we revise the scale and base it on the market figures for minimum, midpoint, and high, and build a scale that way, the class parity would be more in line with that figure there, 1.9 million, to get employees to that, to not only where they would be on our new scale, condensed scale, but also in terms of where they should be in terms of market pay. Now, and here's the funny part. If you take that 1.9 and divide it by 3, okay, because there's a 3-year option down at the bottom that starts off, it's unbalanced. But if you just take the 1.9 and divide it by 3, it's $633,000. And one of the figures we've been talking about, the step increase over the last couple of years, is we need roughly around $600,000 to keep our employees on step. So I said, oh, $633,000, but we would probably be closer to the market if we just continued to fund the step increases on our current scale. We'd be closer to where we need to be. So the numbers that they're recommending would probably get us there. Now, they gave us 3 different options to get the class parity. One is in 1 year, but the price is still the same. 1.9 million is what they're looking at. Over a 2-year period or stretching it out over a 3-year period. What we wanted to do is work with them and Mr. Cully to look at other options to get the class parity, and as we look at revising our scales based on the study's recommendations, and see what reasonably can be done. When the consultant spoke to our employees and they asked about our compensation in the county, the first thing employees said was that, well, why do we have steps if we're not going to be on the steps? Or if we're not, and why do we have a step salary scale if we're not getting steps? And then when they looked at our historical figures here, they said, well, you're not getting step increases. So another option that they proposed was, well, you guys come back to us and let us know what figure you can work with. But then they say, 2, there are other options if you're not going to fund step increases, then there are other options to fund employee salaries that we can look into. But they said, we recommend that whatever you come back with, you make sure that you can do it. There's no need building a salary scale and putting the work into revising our salaries and condensing the 3 scales and putting employees on them if we're not going to be able to sustain it or get them there. Or get them to where they need to be.
It gives you some false information too, if you're looking at the scale and you're expecting people to be on a particular place based on a number of years, and then you compare it to what's actually happening, it's not going to be a truthful reading because we're not following the steps religiously.
But what you're saying to follow the steps is every year,
Right.
you should get $633,000 additional funding.
Actually, we should
just for the step increase.
If we
Yes,
could
nothing
get,
else.
I would say it's less. I would say it's less than that because
Yeah, but you replace that employee, but still,
Even if they're higher up in the pay scale, then we replace them with someone lower that would be cheaper.
I think the 633 is more to get us there. But I think as we look at, even when we did some analysis today and looked at what it would take to get our employees a step increase on our current scale, the 633 I think gets us to the market point. By that time, if we stretch it out over 3 years, whatever way we do it, if we did 633, 633, 633, or if we started off with a small amount and built up, or if we started with a large amount and worked down, by the time you get 3-4 years down the line, around year 3 or 4, you're going to need to do another market analysis to make sure you're.
but my point is year 4, year 5, year 20, you still need at least 600.
You still need to keep your employees
633 every year.
if you have
You're on a
for
step
step
scale.
increase.
if you're on a step scale.
And have you looked at what the county gave you as an increase for the last 5 years?
In terms of Yeah, well, we have, I'm just.
Funding
going by-
increase.
Yes, I have.
Funding
It hasn't been $600,000 for a step increase. We've had to find, the first year I was
Pretty
here, we
close,
found, yeah,
but
it's
it's
been
like
close. It was
500.
four, it was four and some change, the first year I was here, you say around 330, three something
Yeah,
last
but there's
year.
been some state money that's not
And we,
always a
and,
lot,
yeah,
but
and we,
some,
yeah,
you know,
so
it's
we,
100,000.
we kind of worked to get to that 6 the first year, actually it was more than 6 because we also adjusted,
This is adjusted, right?
moved employees on their steps.
Yes, we do.
But, that commitment would have to be there in order to maintain a salary step schedule. What I would hope, it would be less than 600,000 because we have a scale that our steps are large. The only way you can catch up, and this is what our consultant confirmed, if we start off very low and you're almost catching up at the midpoint and you're almost there at the top, means our steps are larger than other divisions because we're catching our employees
How many
up.
steps are there?
30.
Because we condensed it down when I was on the school board from some number to some smaller number. So have they crept up again?
It's 30. It's 30 years.
Most school divisions do a step a year for 30
Yeah,
years.
30.
30 years, but the reality
They're
behind
changing
them.
it though. I know Stafford's got like 38 steps, because the old step 30 is the new step 38. They maxed it, so they just keep dropping their first year salaries every year. And Spotsy, I think mine that I saw, it was like 34 steps, I wanna say. But they increase your steps, they bring new teachers in.
The
to
reason
lower
we're
you.
at 6 right now, or we're closer to 6 in the past, is because our steps are larger. If we condense the 3 scales and we raise the minimum, our annual increase will be less. To maintain employees on the scale will be less. So instead of paying them 2.5, some employees 2.5% increase, it might be a 1.8, which is more consistent with where other divisions are. So you'll get to that more condensed step, which makes the annual increase less for salaries. Right now, in order to give every employee a step increase, it's in the 5 range right now in terms of closer to 5. Am I correct, Melanie? The total cost? Did we do that?
600,000.
Okay.
Step increase, the last one we calculated.
Yeah. So we're closer right now to 5, actually 5 now. And I have heard do some readjustments and calculations on the last sheet here. Based on our current employees and our current employees on scale. Okay, and where would we be if we gave a step increase? So the cost of one step on our current salary scale for teachers, admin, and support staff is $492. Okay, so that's based on actually looking at every employee's current rate and moving them up a step. So that number is that's the target on the current scale. And if we condensed our scale, we would not be in the 600 range, and we just have to get them there first, and then maintaining it would be less than 600. It might be in the 400 range every year, or in the 3 or yes, because of more, yes.
It's gonna be less than 492.
It's gonna be less than 492 because the scales are less.
Right.
The scales, the differential on the scales are less. So it would not be as large a number once we get to
You just have to
the.
front load, is what you're saying. You have to front load this thing in order to make the deltas smaller each year.
Dr. Parker,
Yes, sir.
looking at this page right here,
Mhm.
and just making sure I'm interpreting what it's reflective of. We have, looking at principal high school, it says 40% below market. So our principal right now is getting paid $40,000 less than the principal of the 8 that I can call around to right now.
No, that's a percentage of their salary.
But that's been
It's
going.
an easy percent, easy math, and the numbers are round.
If you look at the one thing that's glaring with Caroline, every year that we've been given them money, every time we give them money, they've given it to teachers, the teachers, the teachers, the teachers. The administrators have not really gotten anything. In all the years I've been on the board, the money that we've been giving them has been going to teachers, 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 teachers. There's not really any-
Actually, 2 years ago,
Yeah, we
principals
did.
and every employee, principals and teachers received
So the
the
number.
step increase, and they were put on the correct place and step in their division. So principals have received it. The scale starts off low for all employees. And that's where.
We've only got one high school principal.
Well, we're unfrozen.
And one middle school principal, who we just hired.
Yes.
Why would she come for a 33%?
She wanted the job. Plus you want to challenge.
Now, you're comparing her to the other divisions that have middle school principals, and they have more than one. But in this principal's case, she wanted to work here. And we basically, we had to find a consistent range before we were on our scale.
It's just not intuitive that our principal is paid 40% less than the comparable principal when everyone has a car and there's interstate highway runs through the county.
Be the first one to agree with you.
That's why we lost.
You won't get any argument from me on that.
How do we lose Mr. Blake?
Well, I don't think
Exactly, how do we lose Scott Blake?
but I don't think this is the
Everybody wants
venue
to
to discuss personnel.
Individuals.
No, it's
No.
not.
So,
I agree, but I just,
So,
no, and to your point, I think that's a good observation, which is why I think there's value in going to a subject matter expert to pull the actual data. So we can move from talking anecdotal to what's the hard numbers. That's correct.
it paints a picture in one direction, but it also throws up a flag in the other. It makes me question the data, to some degree, because the percentage is so large. And human nature is what human nature is.
I mean, when you say somebody's 56% below the market, that means they're making half as much as all their counterparts? If I showed this to somebody,
Head of technology right back there shaking his head, he could stand up and even attest to that. He's one of the lowest paid anywhere around.
Mr. Crowley, let me ask you a question. When we did our salary study, correct me if I'm wrong, like if we were doing a sheriff deputy in Carolina, we compared them to the counties that we compared them to, we did the beginning salary total, right, of a sheriff deputy in Spotsylvania to a sheriff deputy in, say, Hanover, to a sheriff, so like what they started at, what the midpoint, what the high point is, right? So we took the salary, no, we didn't go by hourly wage, right?
Yeah, but I understand their hourly.
it's an easier comparison when you have similar hours that you're working, but there have such a disparity in the number of, if you work, paid $39,000 and you're working 190 days, or paid for 200, and somebody else is 220, or they're not even on that scale, or on some other division. Mathematics, you can't compare
some of
the
the
salaries in total.
he's exactly right. Some are 10 month plus, some are 11 months. So when you get into the salaried employees, that's where you have the problem with you have to compare apples to apples, and their analysis broke it down to hourly wages. So we'll show you how they broke it down to hourly wages. They've done this with many divisions. So I think their calculus is fine. We'll be happy to share the math with you. But in terms of looking at the results, this is what we're presenting, because this is what we paid them to do.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
How many employees have we lost from Chesterfield and then Rico?
We have attrition, but we don't track exactly where everyone goes, because they don't fill out the exit surveys in terms of where,
Always say, I'm leaving here, going somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm spending time with my family. So we don't necessarily know exactly how many teachers or how many staff we would actually lose to Chesterfield or Richmond or in Rico. We just keep track of our attrition rates, and we try to capture why we're losing employees. So that's what we're.
Well, Floyd, one reason is, we lose a lot of them from down there because they live down there. And they come up, they work with us a couple of years until something comes open. We lost a very, very good chemistry teacher, an English teacher that I know of.
To Henrico?
To Henrico and Chesterfield, yeah.
Okay.
Because they was 5 minutes from home. They like working up here, but I mean, it doesn't matter.
I was just asking to factor that into the market peers you use, because I think when the county did ours, we took out Henrico, and we took out Chesterfield,
Richmond and Stafford.
And Stafford for ours. So I was just wondering.
Why did you take them out? We compete with them we compete in this whole market for teams.
Yeah, and that's why I asked you first.
So we have to have the Richmond and the Chesterfield and Henrico, because we compete for talent with those.
That's why I started there first.
Right.
We're not losing, the county government, I don't believe, is losing people to Henrico or to Chesterfield. So Yeah, I mean, you may, but we weren't, so that's why we took them out. That's why I started my question with how many were we losing? And I know this is probably in a spreadsheet somewhere at the consultants. So if they took those two localities out, what would the numbers look like then?
Oh, we can look at that, but, and it's not about us losing them, it's about us getting them. That's why they're included, so I just wanna make that.
Yeah, because when you go to a trade fair,
We're-
or school fair.
Yeah, we're
they're-
competing in the same pot of teachers for these groups. And they have huge deficits now, 40+ teachers. They're starting the year with 40+ teachers, not there and missing. And they're recruiting our folks and everyone else's. So we have to include them because we know we're competing with them for the same talent.
I just wanna check from there based
I'm
on
gonna
that.
suggest we sort of
Yeah.
move on, and we're not gonna get.
Thank you for that, 'cause I was about to make that recommendation. So what we would like to do moving forward is, one, work with Mr. Cully to look at one, other, what options are available to move towards the market minimums and get our employees progressing. What can we feasibly do this year? But we wanted to share this data because that's where we are, and we're using that, obviously, an option of this data in our estimated needs. So we wanted to share that with you today. I'd like to quickly go, and I'm gonna move a little faster because I know we're limited in time. Included in your packet, so I'll just go over a cursory overview of it. Included in your packet, you have our estimated needs that we discussed at the last work session. We were just developing these. But what we did since we've met with you is we've taken our estimated needs and we've aligned them, as we promised last year, we've aligned them with our strategic plan. So we've taken any requests, any additional staffing, any programs, and we said, what requests do we have and how do they align with our strategic plan? So in your packet, you'll see right behind Pathways 2022, there's just some information on the budget priorities that we receive from our principals, our departments, our teachers, our other staff, minus compensation, that align with the strategic plan. So therefore,
Minus compensation.
we relied on the salary study to determine compensation. So it's not included on these pages. You won't see a salary increase on these pages.
These are new stuff.
Just budget requests that were aligned with the strategic plan. Minus compensation, because we just talked about the compensation study will determine what our priorities are there.
So there's no labor cost in that 65,000 on the first line when I'm looking at.
So with staffing, yes, there's compensation increases, giving everyone a step increase.
So this is just added
Added
cost
staff,
today?
yes, sir.
Okay.
That align with the strategic plan, yes, sir. So we wanted to align those items with the strategic plan, and we have 4 key goals under the strategic plan, as you recall: teaching and learning, school and community relationships, health and safety, and the last one is organizational effectiveness. So those items were prioritized and vetted, not only by the school board, but by our constituents to see what were some of the higher, and I think, Mr. Sealy, I think that you're the one that asked me last year, were they prioritized in any way? So you'll see high, moderate. So we took the time to do that under each strategic plan area. And there's a short description of each one of those items and the impact on the school division. Okay, so I thought this would be helpful information for you as you look at our estimate of needs, so it's not just a bunch of stuff. And you can actually say, okay, well, what is this? And why are you asking for this? So we wanted to make sure you had enough detail to understand it, okay? The last item up there included in your packet after the strategic plan is and this is a blue sheet that's fairly hard to read there. And we had good intentions here. This deals with the healthcare increase. And we are anticipating a significant increase in healthcare this year. And what we did talk to the vendor, our consultant today, and he said was driving a lot of the costs. In addition to the market, we've had an increase in claims like we had a bad claim year. We had a very bad claim year.
We had none the year before.
Yeah.
No increase the year before, minimal the year before that. So we had a very, In particular, he basically said paid medical claims year over year are up $401,000. That's a 33% increase. And he said your prior year loss ratio, claims over premiums, was 86.93%. Your current loss ratio is 110.8%, a 27.5% increase. So we just had a bad claim year. I don't think we're going to continue to see a trend like this, but this is going to be a year where we will have that anomaly increase in healthcare that we all dread and have to deal with. I would like to work with Mr. Cully across the table to see if we can find some ways to mitigate the cost. I know we've talked about that a little bit, but we talked about setting some dollars aside. We talked about maybe looking at the employer and employee contributions. But I would like to spend some time with Mr. Cully and our consultant to see if there's any way we can mitigate. We're looking at almost a double-digit increase in healthcare, which is going to be significant for us. When we submit our presentation of our proposed budget to you, we will also hopefully have an idea of how we can mitigate some of the cost of healthcare, because that's going to be a driver this year for our budget. So I wanted to share that with you as well. So Madam Chair, that's pretty much the information I brought with me. I apologize for taking so much time, but I thought it was
I just wanted to make sure we
good
got through
information
all
to-
your packages.
Yes, ma'am, I appreciate that. Oh, the last thing, and I'm putting candy on this, okay? Don't kill me, I'm putting candy on this. This is the estimate of needs based on what I just finished presenting. What I just finished presenting.
Sweet for the sweet.
And I put the mint there to kind of sweeten the taste of the, but remember, consider this a starting point. And I think we've had plenty of conversation about when do you see the numbers and you don't like to see them in the newspaper. And so we're hopefully, I'm hoping you appreciate that we're trying to get enough information to you in advance.
We appreciate it.
So before we pass anything. So ma'am, that
A negative savings is.
that concludes my my presentation, and I'll open up any questions or.
The 1.1 million is the payroll.
That's that filler for the three-year cross.
I missed the beginning, and I'm sorry, but the composite index was redone this year?
Yes, sir.
So you get how much less this year?
Based on the composite, do you have a dollar figure for the?
Be in the
We
adjustment?
put it in the formula, in the spreadsheet when we came in. We're actually gonna see an increase from the state, even though we have a 277.
Oh, it went down.
Right.
But the governor's budget is very favorable, so we're still gonna see an increase. We didn't, yeah. Right.
I thought there was a.
So as we build the budget, that 277 will probably factor into what the bottom line is on these figures as we build the budget.
Right now, just need to know something.
I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but 2.4 is gonna be kind of hard.
Yeah. My goal is to work with Mr. Cully and to try to get that number much lower. And if we can find ways to mitigate healthcare, and we can find a funding formula that will work with our compensation plan, if we can have a compensation plan that we can fund, I'd like to see if we can try to do as much as we can this year, but,
And I've said this before, and probably said it for 25 years. Your job is to present a budget with everything you need. And our job is try to fund that budget with what we have. We've never been able to meet yours, but I just want to make sure we all understand here before it starts showing up in the newspaper. We're going to try to do what we can do best, and you're going to present what you think is appropriate. I'm not mad at you for saying you need 2.4. Don't be mad at me if I say we're not going to give you 2.4. But from my point, my one vote is going to be to give you what we can.
Dr. Parker, the only thing that, well,
That's not
my
easy.
initial, on your additional positions, I'm counting 15, I think there was 15 additional positions, and I'm counting 2 teachers, 2 classroom teachers. I don't know, I mean, to me, the teachers are the ones that are, face to face with the students on a daily basis. I see 15 different positions here, and 52 teachers.
Well, again, we add teachers, and we, Dr. Governor, how many teachers did we add at the beginning of the school year based on student enrollment? So we have one, we have two.
positions, reserve positions.
So what we do at the beginning of the year, we add positions based on actual bodies and seats. And that means that we don't budget in January for an additional teacher, unless we necessarily see a growth pattern that we need to address. We see that in the advanced courses at the middle school. But when we get to the, we have to, in the elementary range, by law, we have to do class size reduction based on law in the beginning of the year for elementary. And if we see an anomaly like at the high school where we need to add an additional English teacher or math teacher, what we do is we divert instructional dollars towards that to get that teacher. Oh, how you doing? Did we have a folder? Okay. We divert the money as necessary to add those teachers. So while you don't see it in the budget, what you may see is based on student enrollment or student fluctuations, we may add teachers in August based on the number of students, or we may move, like this year, we may move a teacher from Madison to Lewis and Clark because more kids show up at Lewis and Clark than Madison. So I wouldn't be alarmed if you don't see an overabundance of teachers in the initial budget. We make sure that we have actual instructional positions based on student enrollment.
But you're projecting that lower.
Yes, yes.
So it would be not real need to request a budget.
No, we're fine right now. In terms of our ratios, in terms of meeting SOQ requirements, and in terms of class sizes, and I did send you that class size information today electronically. Others in the middle school, which I've mentioned on several times, we're fine across the division in terms of class size and student enrollment. So we don't have a significant need for a lot of them.
Just some math so that you can put this in perspective. 2.4 million minus cost of living adjustment increase of 1.13, minus healthcare increase of 903,000 and $451,720 for all the other items that we want, that we think are necessary. So we loaded up $2 million in just two items, cost of payroll and healthcare.
And how firm is the healthcare?
It's, they're finishing up the actuarial information, but they know it's gonna be in the area of 20%. So, that number right there, it will hold. He's quite sure we'll hold. We'll have to find a way to mitigate some of the cost of that.
What is there any employee paid, what's that?
Yeah, that's the employer share. So the employee share, on this nice fancy slide that we developed, we took an employee's salary and we added the healthcare increase, and it roughly ended up being about $70 or $80, am I right?
Oh, that was $60, $62.
Yeah, so it was, their employee share will go up, based on their plan, they'll go
So
up.
those are, it's not 100% funding back.
And we looked at our percentage to see whether we pay a higher employer percentage than other divisions, and we're fairly consistent. We've had a bad claim year. This is just one of those years where you, the math isn't on your side.
Policy and not out of your.
Well, last year, we got a break. But we knew what was going to
Have
happen.
more younger teachers, you probably don't have these high costs.
That's why they said last year, that's why I said we didn't have an increase, we had so many young teachers. There was no claims, because everybody, we have no experience.
Dr. Parker, well, I'm just saying, we're just about out of time. I want to thank you all for coming. Did you have a closing statement?
Well, I had a question, but it may run us over time, so if I may ask it, and then you can decide if we can table it or not.
Okay.
So we've shared our process of how we come to building this needs-based budget, and I respect your comment about understanding that price tag is based on needs-based. So what I'd like to get is an understanding of your process with how you figure out how you're allocating funds to the school system. Like, do you have a process that you use to prioritize things, just so that I can have a better understanding of, how you process it, that number that then comes back to us?
For the fact that that's not going to be a simple answer, because it's not a simple budget, my suggestion would be sometime you meet with Mr. Cully and.
Or we're discussing 202, sure.
Or on 202s, whatever, but it's not something I don't think we can answer here in 2 minutes.
Well, I've got one I want you to think about. If we don't get what we need and we can't give our employees the raises, I want you to give me some suggestions. I'd like you to come up with suggestions of what I can tell these employees of why they didn't get their raises. I want you guys to do it instead of me. Come up with the ideas of how I can keep them happy because we don't get what we need to give them what they need.
I would follow my job description.
Okay, you just come up with some ideas. You hear me?
That's what they think.
All right. Again, thank you all so much. I think it's been good to start this process early. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
We don't need.
Yes, we do. We need to
So
adjourn.
moved.
Recess or?
Because this is a continuation of the last meeting. So you need
So I
to.
make a motion, we,
Yeah.
okay, we're good.
Do we have a motion to adjourn? Do we have
I
a
do.
second?
Actually, can we take just a moment, I can give you a starting point to your question. And at this point, Mr. Cully has a good idea of what comes in the door. And y'all have years of budget, we have years of budget. Y'all seen our budget, we've seen your budget, you know, for the most part. At this point, there's a lot, it's tweaks, it's small, it's turning the knobs instead of giant levers. From my perspective, there's not a whole lot of, our intake has been slowly inching up as far as revenue. But we're pretty sure what that max for everything is. And I know that Mr. Cully does a fairly conservative budget because the last thing we want is to go negative on the budget and spend more than what we know. So we do have a fairly conservative budget as far as trying not to overextend ourselves. It's been positive the last couple of years. But at the end of the day, we got a good idea of what the max expenditures for police, fire, county employees, road projects, I mean, everything. And it's just a process, and it's less defined, but there are a lot of moving parts, like I said, a lot of knobs to turn. It would be nice if we could we want to do this, and our number would be larger and require a significant tax increase as well. But there, again, we're looking at it different ways, but at the end of the day, there's a max number that we know that we're going to have to divvy up to make everything go.
First, we have to do this. Yeah.
And maybe not articulating it well, but it's not an easy night. I'll be glad to sit down with you.
You can
Explain how I look at it. That might give you some insight of how 1 of 6, how our minds work.
In other words, every year you can't say the school system gets 34%.
Agree, because we might have.
Thank you.
Has our
Do I have a second?
Could I just give her an understanding, when I do 2.4 million, we look at as just a tax increase, and that would be a 10 cents tax increase if we just said there's no revenue for the county. We'll raise taxes by 10 cents just to fund the school budget fully. So once you start looking at it like that, you get an understanding of what people will say about that 10 cent increase. They did fairly well when we said we wanted to spend 25 million for schools.
Well, guys, I always feel that puts us on a bad footing with the public. And, there are things. things we can look at that hopefully we'll take into consideration. One is payment to debt service and savings from debt service. The surplus, I mean, every year with the county has been a very good fiscal agent, and you've ended up with a conservative budget over $1 million. The surplus every year, I think this year was almost $3.2 million.
It was 1.6.
It was 1.6 in surplus, but 1.6 in
That we
unspent
didn't
revenue,
spend.
which was 3.2.
Well, it was money we already had, so in the budget, what came in was
Budget is-
1.6, not 3.2.
So my purpose for asking that question was really to continue to create this dialogue. Because it's best when we talk and we know what the processes are, what we're thinking, then we can present a united front to our constituents instead of walking away with our assumptions. So my thing was, you've heard from us, and I think it's respectful to hear from you on how you process.
And then my point of view
But
is, if
it
it's
has
a
to be a separate
baseline,
meeting,
that's
because
what
we
it
have
is.
another meeting in 10
But
minutes.
since it's not a
So, can I have a
baseline,
second to adjourn,
But it's not all,
please?
it's not all about new revenue, which is what I'm saying.
I have a motion,
I just want to make that
a
point.
second
It's not all about new
to
revenue.
adjourn. All in
Let's
favor,
let's
say aye.
make sure we understand.
Aye.
So moved.
You gotta get this crowd under control.
As long as I was